For this video, I will be cutting these two beautiful pieces of amethyst from Uruguay that I got from Joe H. Thanks, Joe. In this video, I'm going to show how to cut one of the most basic designs that any new gem cutter can cut as their first or second gemstone. I will be using this design called Standard Square Step Cut with Cut Corners. I'm not a gem cutting instructor in that I don't have students and give one-on-one in-person training. There are a lot of great instructors out there, and when I started cutting, I did go to a 5-day class and cut a few basic stones and learned all about my new gem cutting machine from an instructor, one-on-one, well, 3-on-1. I think there were 3 students. Later, when I felt I was hitting a rut in cutting, I went back to another instructor and spent a weekend with him kind of looking over my shoulder to overcome an issue I felt I was having. So I do recommend that if it fits in your budget, you go to some in-person training to learn gem cutting. And if it's not in your budget, you might be able to do it at one of the local gem cutting clubs where there's plenty of talented cutters that will be glad to give you pointers and see how you're doing. I think most instructors start with a standard round brilliant design and then this design as the second stone, but I do know of several instructors who teach the square cut first and then later go and teach the standard round brilliant. As a beginning cutter, you need to try to cut the stone as close to the design information as you can. Later, you can make artistic changes on the fly, but not as a beginner. Focus on hitting the instructions as exactly as possible. Don't let it confuse you. I explain all this information in several other videos that I created, and you can go look at them here and learn all about the information. So the next thing I want to do is take advantage of my keyed dot when I'm cutting both of these so I can use one lap and go through both stones, at least during the roughing stages. When I get to the finer stages, I'll take care of each stone individually because... Okay, I'm going to use a feature of the Ultratech to help me preform my amethysts when I'm cutting my standard square step stone. And that, what the people at Ultratech have told me is they have a larger base platine here and that than other machines. I don't know if that's true or not. I only know the Ultratech, but that allows the use of a saw blade, gives it a good base to put it on, so that much can be cut. And then they have an adapter. Let's go ahead and put it on this way where there's more flat. I don't know which way it goes down. I'm thinking this way goes down with the flat round here. And you tighten it down. I've never seen any instructions video showing exactly how to use it, the saw. So I do know you want a lot of water. We're gonna have a pretty good drip of water going. I think I want to go that direction. That would be the direction that my saw blade in my trim saw would be going as I run the stone through, so that's what I'm going to do. Okay, so the lowest point is at the 96 index tooth. So we set our, I already checked it with the lap, so we set it to the 96. We're going to make 4 cuts, 96, 24, 72, I'm sorry, 48 and 72, the 4 sides of our square cut. So we'll set it up for the 96 and initially just run it down until it touches till the stone touches the blade. If I can get the splash guard out of the way. A 90-degree angle, the stone is touching the saw, so now I'll move it over and I'll move the stone down a little ways. I don't know how far to move it down. Just want to slowly cut. I'll bring it up about 700 RPMs. change it to 24, the 24 tooth, 48 tooth, and 72 tooth. And that barely cut much off, so I'm going to go through it again, cutting much more off, and try it again. By using my trim saw blade and adapter from the Ultratech, I've preformed the stone more into a square than it was. Same with, I've done both stones much more square now. And to clean it, you just take the water off and air dry it. That'll prevent any rust. So the adapter, that's the adapter, the saw blade adapter feature of the Ultratech. Is it as good as a trim saw? No. I like trim saw, much more versatile in what it can do. But I like it that I can save a lot of time trying to grind down our piece of rough with laps by just simply trimming it off and trimming off, all these little pieces. I got a whole bunch of them in there I got to fish out. I like the feature. I like the saw. I'd also have a trim saw. But I do like this this feature. It saves a lot of time on grinding. Okay, I've preformed with the 360 grit diamond the shape, the basic size of the stone. It's going to be small, a little smaller than this. I guess each of the gemstones will be larger than 11 millimeters. And I marked the point where I need the pavilion to not go beyond, and that will leave me enough space to cut the upper half of the stone, the crown, as well as a space for the girdle. Now the girdle is normally I cut between a 0.3 and a 0.5 millimeter girdle. Is in preforming the stone with the saw blade and my 360 grit diamond. I then did the first row on the pavilion, which is at a 63 degree angle. And then the next one is at a 53 degree angle. And you kind of eyeball where it should be. It's just, the instructions are cut as required, so you kind of guess, how far it should go up. And then the third one at 43 degrees, you cut to a permanent center point, so you'll have a little point at the end. So instead of following that order, the order of those instructions, what I'm going to do is reverse them. I'm not going to do the 53 degree angle, which will set it'll bring it, it'll be a different angle going down somewhere to here, or maybe a little lower, maybe a little higher. I'm going to skip that for now and go to the final instruction for the establishing the point, and that's at a 43 degree angle, and make a permanent center point. So I'm going to make my permanent center point with the 43 degrees and then go back to the 53 degrees and cut the difference between whatever's left, so they'll have three different facets. I'll do it that way, and it seems to make more sense to me. So we'll see how that works out. Okay, so I cut the top row to make a permanent center point, except I did not make quite a center point. And the reason, of course, is that I still have, this is a 320 grit, I still have a 600 grit to go and a 1200 grit to go, and then probably a 3000 for sure, and then maybe another level before I polish. So every time I retouch this tier, it's going to, of course, close up that center point. And once it's closed, every time I touch this tier, it's just going to make my length of my stone smaller, and it affects how wide I want the stone. I want to make it as wide as I possibly can, as big a stone as I possibly can given this rough. So now I've done the 43 degree angle and I've done the 63 degree angle. So the next one, now I'll do the 53 degree angle, and it'll form another line, and I'll put it roughly, for now, in between those two. It's going to be affected when I cut the corners to fit exactly where it goes, because it has to match the final corner one, which comes up and will touch right here. So that's why I reversed those two instructions. And also I'm using with the 320 grit or the 360 grit diamond, I'm finishing up one stone, and then with the keyed dop, I'll just throw the other stone in there and finish it up, preforming it the same way with our 360 grit diamond, and then work on the 600 level. So let's go cut the 53 degree angle. Okay, so then I just finished going back and cutting the 53 degree angle to make the 3 tiers of our stone. And again, it doesn't matter right now. Just close enough's close enough. We don't know yet until we do the angles. So just preforming right now. So I could wait to the 600 grit to do the sides of this stone, but I'll probably go over it once with this 360 grit and just kind of start to establish the sides, and then move to the second stone. Okay, so one of our stones is now preformed with the 360 grit diamond on the pavilion, and those are all the facets for this design. So now I'll switch my other stone and do the same with it. Now notice the little black marker that I put is at this current width. I need that much space to cut the crown and the girdle, so I have a little extra space, but it'll get a little smaller because there's a couple of areas right there I have to clean up, which will make the stone a little bit smaller, but not a lot smaller. We're pretty close to this being about the size it's going to end up with, and we have enough rough to cut the stone we want. So now let me go through the same steps on the second stone. Okay, I finished pre-polishing, or I guess pre-forming, both of our amethysts with the 360 grit diamond. Now I'll switch to the 600 and just tighten things up a little bit, and then the 1200 and continue on there with our pavilion. Okay, I'm ready to pre-polish our amethyst with 3000 grit diamond and using the bat laps. I'll leave the stone in the dop. I won't use the keyed feature of Ultratech anymore. Just swap out the stones, because a brand new cutter should try to cut the stone as exacting as possible given the instructions, to help gauge your own development of your gem cutting skills. For the rest of the pre-polishing and polishing, I'll work one stone and then the other stone. Okay, I finished one of our 2 amethyst stones, and now I'll switch out and finish the other one, which is started, but I just need to do a couple more laps and we'll be polishing it also. Okay, I've got one of my amethysts set up to transfer from the first dop to the second dop, and inside you can see the little piece of putty down in the very bottom of it, and that's just to protect the culet, or the very bottom part of our stone. That way the only thing holding on to that very tip is the 2-part epoxy in putty. So the putty will give up before the stone will snap, at least I'm thinking. But what I wanted to show you is, I've told you that I mix the 2-part epoxy just with a business card, a bamboo skewer, and I eyeball a 50-50 mix. So I've had 1 or 2 people come back and suggest different ways to measure the 2-part epoxy. And what I would say is, guys, here's where I'm at. This is the 1 bottle, and this is the 2nd bottle. So by eyeballing it and using all of that, I'm pretty close, right? So again, I don't feel the need to pour the epoxy into some type of measuring device and then pour it onto the business card. Just eyeball 2 even puddles. It works, and that's close enough for the 50-50 mix for your 2-part epoxy. Now these are about a year old. I date them when I buy them, and after a year I'm going to replace it, because the hardener changes color over time, and people have told me they lose power over time. So all I'm going to do is mix them up and put it in my transfer jig in the dop. So once you start mixing the hardener and the resin, you have a couple of minutes before it starts hardening up. But before you mix it, it's no big deal. Nothing will happen. So again, I understand you could get some scientific way to measure a 50-50 mix, but as I just showed you, over time, the bottles are both pretty much equal, which means over time I've had a pretty good 50-50 mix by just eyeballing the puddles. So then you mix it together. And I'm going to fill that, and just so you know, the reason I'm putting my finger there is because it helps me focus on my fingernail. Kind of hard to focus on a smooth piece of brass, and I'm not a good photographer, and I want to make sure that I don't have everything out of focus, which I normally do, I know. So I'm just going to fill the cone with the 2-part epoxy. Make sure there's some on the outside of the dop. Then I'm going to push the top dop into the bottom dop. Tighten up the transfer jig and turn it over and let gravity do its work. I don't want the epoxy to go too far down on the dop, or it'll cause a problem trying to put the dop into the Ultratech. And I don't want the epoxy to move on to the girdle of our stone. Otherwise, when I'm working with our stone, it'll gum up the laps. So I'll just keep moving it around for a little while until the epoxy sets up. And then I'll let it harden overnight and work on another stone. For my second amethyst stone, I took my lightning laps out of the toolbox. I haven't used them in a while, and you kind of got to use all your tools once in a while so you remain, proficient on using them. And also because I'm waiting on another equivalent of a 1200 grit diamond lap that's been under manufacture for now 3 months. So I was using the 1200 topper, which I don't recommend. And the problem with topper is they're a thin metal lap impregnated with diamonds that's only that thick. This is a 1200 lap. And the problem is they're not perfectly flat. So they kind of, vibrate a little bit, especially near the ends. And that causes the stone to be not an even facet. It's no problem with your rougher grits, the 320, 360, 260s, the 200 range, 300 range, the 600 range. It's okay, because you're going to then go to the 1200, the 3000, and then the polished. So even if it's not perfectly flat, by the time you take off additional layers of your stone, it's not a problem. The 1200 not being flat is a problem. I would not recommend buying a 1200 grit topper. I would not go beyond a 600 grit topper. And even that, I only started using it because my Crystallite 600 grit lap finally wore out. So lightning laps, which are colored, they're also toppers, but they're flat. They work great. So that, my 1200 did an amazing job. Lightning laps have usually done well. They're a nice tool to have in your toolbox when you can fit them into your budget. I did not have lightning laps when I first started. It's not an initial lap that I would recommend for a new cutter. A new cutter, I would get toppers of 200-ish range, depending what's available, just off of anywhere, eBay or from China or high tech, wherever. 200 range, 300 range, 360, something to preform. I would not buy anything more rough than 100 grit under any circumstances. They cause substructure damage to your stones. So I would not even start below a 260 grit. But a 200, 300, 600 grit with toppers, fine. Beyond that, I would not buy a topper. So I'd buy, if I was just starting out, probably a 260, 220, whatever they are, 360, 320 as a second lap, a 600 topper, unless I could afford a Crystallite lap, and then a 1200 Crystallite, and then I would go to the bat laps, 3,000, 8,000, 14,000. You could probably get by with just the 3,000 initially, and then your polishing laps for most stones. And if I was just starting, I would use the disposable ultra laps. cerium oxide for your quartz and some other stones, and your aluminum oxide for your garnets and tourmaline and some other stones there. For harder stones like sapphire corundum, which is sapphire ruby, crystal beryl, you're going to need probably the ultra laps, the bat laps, to polish those. So that's what I would do for a new person, brand new, with a budget and spending most of your budget when you buy your machine. That's how I would start out. But the lightning laps are working great. Did a great job at the 1200. I haven't done the sides yet. I've not been in touch with the 1200 yet, but everything else does a great job. And these little black marks are my permanent marker where I was making sure everything was level. And I want to make sure that the space for the pavilion from the culet, the tip, on down to where the girdle is the same as the length to width ratio, the pavilion to width ratio, so that I have the right amount of space so that I can even up these 3 facets and follow the instructions exactly, and still have enough space for the upper half of the stone, the crown to width ratio, plus enough for a girdle. So I'm back on track using my lightning laps, and I give 2 thumbs up to lightning laps. And our second stone, the pavilion's now polished, so we'll transfer this stone in our transfer jig also. Okay, now we're ready to cut the top half of our standard square step cut amethyst. I've finished polishing the crown or upper half of our standard square step cut with cut corners design, and so now I'll take the dop out of our index gear spindle here and set it up so that I can cut the table and polish the table, the final part of getting this stone all done. All right, let me show you how to set your Ultratech up to cut the table, or the very flat top part of the stone. So the first thing I do is I put the index at 96 degrees. I don't think that matters, but I like to do things the same way every time, so I do that step. Then what you want to do is get this set screw out of the way, because another tool is going to slide over this index and it'll hit that unless you move it out of the way. So use your Allen wrench and remove your set screw. Very small screw and you don't want to lose them. So Ultratech drilled a little hole for you right there in your Ultratech, and that's for putting your set screw in. Only purpose of that is so you don't lose your set screw. You don't want it walking away. Next step, you turn your angle of your Ultratech at 45 degrees because you need 90 degrees for your table to be flat. So this gives you 45 degrees, and then you take one of the 2 tools that come with your Ultratech, the 45 degree angle tabling adapter, and this is going to slide onto your Ultratech, and then your dop is going to slide in this piece, and that gives you another 45 degrees. So your tabling adapter, and by setting your angle at 45 degrees and your tabling adapter is another 45 degrees, that gives you 90 degrees. So you slide your 45 degree tabling adapter onto your spindle. Now the problem is you don't want it, sideways wobbling, or you wouldn't get a flat table. So the next tool is your table aligner, and this is just a dop with a very flat bottom. So you slide that onto your 45 degree tabling adapter and put it on your flattest lap. My flattest lap is my ceramic lap, which for the many times I would not recommend you buy one. It's only about half the cutters are able to get it to work properly. The other, it's very finicky, so I would not buy it. It's very expensive. But if you have one and you need a doorstop or a flat lap to put work on, that's what it's good for. Okay, so you tighten up the 2 set screws in your 45 degree tabling adapter, you remove your table aligner, and you put in whatever stone to cut the table on, and the table is then, your stone is there, then set up to cut the table. That's how we set it up. Okay, I finished polishing our standard square step cut with cut corners amethyst. Now I'll soak it in acetone and remove the two-part epoxy. Then we'll weigh it and measure it and send it off to BOPIE. Now I'll work on the other standard square step cut with cut corners amethyst. All right, for our second amethyst for our square step cut, we're ready to start cutting the upper half of the stone or the crown, and we have quite a bit to cut down to get to the girdle. The girdle will be, about the width of my fingernail, the thickness of the fingernail, so that all the rest of it gets cut out. And so I've got a new 320 or 360, what is it? It's a 320 topper. I just am currently just using the toppers. You can buy them on eBay, Amazon, wherever. And at the 300 level, 200 level, for me, toppers are fine. You just put them on a master lap. In my case, I use my ceramic lap. And they're relatively inexpensive. Let's start on this second amethyst with our new 320 grit topper. Okay, we finished polishing the table of the standard square step cut with cut corners amethyst. Now I'll take it out of the out of the machine and soak it in acetone until we get the stone removed from the dop. Then we'll take a look at it and weigh it and measure it and send it off to BOPIE. Okay, in this video I showed you how to use the optional saw and adapter for the Ultratech. I have not worked a lot with this saw on my Ultratech, but I saved a lot of time trimming the stone on my Ultratech instead of grinding the stone with the laps. I think the more I use the saw adapter, the better I'll become with it. You do not need this optional saw and adapter to cut gemstones, but I feel that I can save a lot of time when grinding rough in the preforming stage of cutting a gemstone. So I would say that using this saw feature does require some skill and a slow hand and steady pressure. I have shown you how to follow the length width information and other information on a gem diagram to ensure your finished gemstone exactly matches the gem diagram information. This cut is suitable for brand new gem cutters, and I hope the information in this video is useful to you as a new gem cutter. This is a standard gem cutting design, and again, any new cutter should not be afraid to give this design a try. Let us all know in the comments how you do once you've cut this design. Happy fasting, everyone.